So my name is John Banda, and half Zambian, half Malawian, born in Zim. And I've been on the UI and UX, or I guess product design path for like 3 years now, working at Zimbabwe Shared Services. Zimbabwe Shared Services is a fintech. So basically, they've been dealing with USSD, internet banking, more mobile banking, and have been working with a couple of local banks, and one of their clients is Zanaco, which is from Zambia. And yeah, so most of my experience, at least working in-house, has been working, in the financial sector. And apart from that, I've also worked, done like freelance gigs, working on security apps and well, yeah, mostly security apps and other gigs where it's mostly been visual design. I wasn't really involved in the UX part. So that's basically like my, I guess, background, brief summary of, who I am, what I do, and, where I'm currently working. So for today's, I guess, talk, I think, especially when it comes to, I guess, I'm pretty sure everyone who's like in this career or in this path wants to live up, get more opportunities, maybe work at, or maybe get your first job, or maybe you want to become like go from being junior to mid to senior level, UI, UX designer, or maybe you want to start your own, design consultancy or whatever. Everyone has their own dreams and ambitions. But before you can make any of that happen, you need to kind of like, I guess, take like a self audit of where you stand. And I kind of like to use what you call the dominance hierarchy, where you're comparing yourself to, I guess, other people we're in competition with, knowing where you stand. And I don't know, some people are very competitive, some people are not really that competitive. Maybe being in competition is stressful. So I can understand that, people have different dynamics when it comes to like, oh, how do I get better? How do I get hired? How do I, come to terms with the fact that I'm applying for this job, but, I'm competing with 90 other people. But what I want to do, at least for this evening, or in this case for Tadio's sake, I'm guessing it's like lunchtime, is I want to just I guess maybe break down how I see being competitive, or how I view being competitive. And let me go to the next slide. Okay, so all right, yeah, I'll get to the softwares I use later on. So basically the way I look at it is this: there's obviously your progression in terms of skills, basically knowledge of software. I'm pretty sure most of us, it's either InVision or Figma or Adobe XD or Extra, like the multiple tools that you use. And for UX researchers, there are also multiple tools that you use. Like there's, I think if I'm not mistaken, there's some programming UX user research software that's being used by user researchers when they're doing qualitative data, etc. So there's the technical side. There's also the aspect of soft skills, which is very important, which I think maybe when people are still starting, they kind of overlook, because I think at the moment you're mostly concerned about increasing your value in terms of competency. Can you do the double end? Can you, go through the process? Can you do the design thinking process properly? Can you do like how many research methods can you use? Like, are you going to do ethnographic studies? Are you going to do interviews, surveys, and stuff like that? Like, there's so much like that's there that I guess in our arsenal to get good. But I feel like there's a lot that goes on for us to at least elevate our skills. So let me just I guess do like a quickie on like I guess some of the tools I use. So in terms of like I guess getting good in terms of like using tools that help me in actually day-to-day tasks, Adobe XD, sometimes when it's essential, Premiere Pro for some, like, because at times at work I may need to do explainer videos or something like that. And After Effects, I've noticed, like, especially in a lot of I don't know, you should check a lot of UX roles, like they'll say like, can you do motion design and stuff like that. So the reason why I'm listing some of these skills, or not skills, some of the tools that I'm using, is because um, part of the reason why I kind of learned, these tools was because I noticed that okay, in the kind of UX work or even like design work, so sometimes you get graphic design work, yeah, you tend to notice that okay, so all right, so not only should you be good at using your UI and UX tools like Figma, Adobe XD, but you should be able to do some motion design. Because sometimes I think the one thing I will highlight, which is a limitation for I guess some of these prototyping tools, I can't speak for InVision or Axure because I haven't used those, but especially when you're trying to do animations, like sometimes you can't do them at different timings. You kind of like, if you say 3 seconds, 4 seconds, it has to animate everything. Like the button going to the next screen is 4 seconds. Whereas like if you were actually programming, you'd probably code each component. And I think that's where the freedom of using After Effects comes in when you want to kind of like get that more, I wouldn't say closer to reality because After Effects also kind of it can overshoot, and programmers will be like nah, I think that will cause problems when we actually try to implement that into the actual final product. But generally speaking, I feel like when you know more tools, and also if you're checking a lot of uh, jobs that some of the things that they list on in terms of like what they want in terms of your expertise, you notice like generally, if you want to be more competitive, if you want to get good, you need to actually know more, and not just know software for the sake of knowing software, but using the right tools to get like specific things done. So yeah, for the most part, the Adobe software I use and some 3D stuff, because I've noticed that it comes in handy, especially if you want to do more UI that's related to, I guess, entertainment, games and stuff like that. If you can model and make icons, custom icons, and it comes in handy, like in actual work. All right, so okay, so you're probably wondering why is there an image of people with their heads in the sand? Okay, so basically there's this thing called the ostrich effect. Just out of curiosity, do you guys know what the ostrich effect is? Like anyone?
No,
Nope.
I don't.
No. Okay. Okay, cool. So I guess I'll explain. Okay, so all right. So the ostrich effect is basically, so the actual animal, right? The ostrich, right? Whenever it would encounter danger or something it wasn't happy with, it would put its head down in the sand. And so instead of actually dealing with these problems or dealing with the reality of maybe it's not going through a good time, or maybe it's in danger, it would put its head down in the sand. So the reason why I'm using this, I guess, image, right, is basically in terms of like when you're not doing self-evaluation of like at least your skills or where you stand in the dominance hierarchy, as I would like to put it. Sometimes like let's say there's certain people who I guess comes to assessing their skills, maybe they're afraid to get criticism or to ask for help, or at least to find out where they stand. And I feel like at times, especially if you want, you're afraid to ask for critique, and you stagnate. Maybe you're not that good and they still need to develop their skills. So generally speaking, when it comes to, I guess, growth as a designer, I feel like you need to overcome that thing that we call the ostrich effect, where you tackle like whatever inhibitions that you have in terms of like what you can do head on. And you realize that, yeah, as much as I want to do this, I want to compete with other people I also have to be aware of where I stand. Am I really that good? What's lacking? Am I very good at my visual design? What should I improve? Should I be more thorough when it comes to coming up with the design system? And is everything consistent? My line icons, or am I using solids or etc today properly? So it's more like doing like having self-awareness about where you really stand and actually doing things properly. Um, because there's one thing I think I realized when I was doing some or joining some other UX platforms or listen to podcasts, that you'll be surprised that sometimes the person who has 5, 6, 7, or 8 years of experience will probably leave a job and they'll be applying for the same role as you, who probably has like one or two, or maybe you're junior, like you're still entry level. And now you wonder like, how can I compete with this person who's been working at this place for 10 years, probably knows what they're doing, and how do I stand out, etc. So it's one of those like, you have to like list down like, where can I improve, how do I stand out. And I guess, I don't know, I feel like it's just having self-awareness that, so this is basically, what's happening. You're competing with people 7 years, 8 years. If I'm not mistaken, one of our, I think one of the members for the UXM who works at Shift Engage, I think he's been a UX guy for like 7, 8 years. Um, yeah, so there'll be guys who'll be competing with him, etc., trying to get the same job, or sometimes it's maybe not due to experience, sometimes it's the right fit. Maybe you focus a lot, like for me, I focus a lot on financial stuff. So if, let's say, I wanted to apply and have a portfolio that shows, okay, John has worked in the financial sector, is, designed stuff for banking apps, etc. He has this process. If I try to apply for a similar role, right, versus someone who probably was working on something different, I'm more of a better fit for that kind of, like, obviously things can change depending on the interview process and how they, how you how they handle the experiencing whiteboard challenge, etc. But basically, I just want to make clear that, these are kind of the variables that you're dealing with, especially when you're trying to go against other people. All right, so I think, yeah, so now on this topic. So I was watching, there's this YouTuber, like, who's also runs like some UX agency, right? Who mentioned this, this article is taken from the NN group, or Nielsen Norman group, talking about the stages of UX maturity. So the reason why I'm bringing up the stages of UX maturity, right, is because I feel like it's also applicable, especially in Zimbabwe, and maybe depend, like, if you've worked in as a UI and UX designer in the, I guess, the realm of an agency, in the agency environment. Because an agency environment, it's more about getting things done quickly. Some of the processes for you to be thorough, like, skipped for the sake of you churning out something for the client. So like, most likely you'll be covering a lot of visual design. There won't be a lot of user research. There'll be a lot of A/B testing, because agencies are fast. They get a lot of clients, and they want to make sure money's coming in, things get out. And then maybe if you're working locally and for some reason maybe you haven't managed to convince like some of the stakeholders that there's value in UX, they'll overlook certain processes. And I feel like, depending on which environment you have, it can stifle or make it difficult, especially if you want to transition to, I guess, better opportunities. So, for instance, like, if number one, ignored, non-existent, undiscovered. So meaning that when you're making a product, everything is anecdotal. It's the opinion, or the opinion of this person or that person, or what they feel, what they think. So it's no different from when you're a graphic designer, because I feel like when I'm now comparing graphic design to a bit UI and UX, it's like graphic design, the client wants you to design a logo, design this post, etc. It needs to look like this and that. However, you're not factoring in, would actually, what are the goals? Would affect their, some of these metrics, because you need to have like success metrics. Like, okay, what is a metric of success when we make this app? What is the metric of, what is failure? What is success? What is like decent? It's, oh, basically the best way I can break it down. It's like you're a pixel pusher. You're just there to get things done, but you're not actually adding value. You kind of like, it's the same as saying, hey, can you draw this for me? Can you design this for me? Can you make these, can you make it look shiny? But what are we trying to achieve? And as you go on, if you check, there's, especially when you look at 2 and 3, um, when you try to make use of work that was fall in this kind of environment, especially in your portfolio, because what I've noticed, especially, I think Tado will even confirm, as you try to, as you try to apply abroad, and or at least maybe companies or organizations that are very design focused and UX focused, when you don't really have a comprehensive process of doing your user research, come up with your personas, trying to validate, or like, okay, so you guys decided to go for this direction. Why did you go for this direction? Like, can you explain it? And those holes will show up in your portfolio. And I think with this discussion I had with one of my cousins, where we're discussing about why is it that, like, it's very few, like a lot of, I guess, local companies struggle or don't really value UX. And even if you did a good job, you did the visual design properly, design system properly, and design systems are very valuable because consistency. You don't have too many sizes for icons, or you don't have like 14 swatches. A developer won't like you, has to make classes for 14 things and keep tabs of that. But I was like, so why is it that local companies, some of them, like not all of them, but has struggled to value UX or etc? Because I guess for the most part, I feel like maybe in other countries, or other like environments where it's very competitive, there's so many options. If you're button, or if the experience is bad, people have so many options. They'll leave. There's I guess, a mature online like community where people are constantly involved. Whereas in Zim, I mean, for the most part, I think social media apps and some internal like software that's used because it's proprietary and it's necessary. But otherwise, there isn't like a, okay, it's very important. And unless you can prove to them that, oh, okay, this actually affects the bottom line, you know, then they won't really go through that process or won't even have a budget for it. So that's now just doing like a critique of Zim. But now let's say you as a designer, you've been through that system, you have gone through that way, you're skipping stages, and now you have to come up with a portfolio, and you have to kind of like, the user research we did, like we actually didn't do user research, I just worked on visual design. So now think about, you're coming from that environment, you're competing with other people who probably come from UX boot camps where they've been grilled to do that. And even going to a UX boot camp, there's no guarantee that you will get hired. You would just train to at least understand the process of how to work on the in the job, etc. Imagine you come from that environment, you have to compete with that person, you have to compete with the person who's been doing it for 8 years, 5 years, and you've got holes. Yeah. So if you really think about it, you start to realize, oh, so because of the way we do things, or certain things have been ignored. If, let's say, I were to use some of the work that I did at, maybe, wherever you're working, right? You try to apply like abroad, yeah, cool. So maybe you're very good in certain things, but maybe a hiring manager would be like, there are certain things that are missing, etc. and that. And now the question is, how do you then solve those problems? If I remember correctly, our previous guest speaker mentioned, like, the whole working on personal projects, doing, or in this case, speculative work, because it's more like work that's not tied to a client, but you kind of, if, let's say, the organizations don't have budgets for that, or don't want you to be involved in certain processes that would probably be red flags if you weren't doing them, like, especially in other companies that are very design focused, then it would be more ideal to actually work on speculative work, do that kind of stuff. And I feel like, at least in the context of Zim, if, let's say, you're dealing with that issue where, like, all right, I feel like my portfolio is whole, because if I were to literally, I mean, sure, you can explain away that, okay, I did this and that, but I'm pretty sure some hiring managers will be like, all right, so I get that you ended up getting to this fine end result, but how come the organization you had skipped these processes that, it's like something I think I noticed, and I think other designers are noticed, especially if, let's say, the organization you had isn't very user research focused. Before I continue, I wanted to ask you, are there any questions?
you touched on like getting some like self-awareness. This is maybe something we can come back to at the end, but it's just how much of that comes from actually talking to people about UX versus like learning stuff yourself, teaching yourself stuff.
Okay. Oh, so do you want me to answer now or you want me to answer later?
No, we'll come back to it, I guess. Yeah.
All right, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Cool. Cool. All right. So, okay, where was I? All right. So, all right. So, yeah, that was like one of the things I wanted to highlight on the whole, like, you know, how do you then, when you, the way you do things is different from the way it's expected in other like parts of the world, or if, let's say, if you're applying for a role and the company is very design focused or UX focused. I'm pretty sure a lot of us, especially, you know, in our extra time, we tend to, I guess, do courses online or get extra information to help, you know, the mind, or at least help us in our career, or to know certain things that are lacking. And I feel like for the most part, personally, I use, like, I'm mostly on interaction design foundation, that site. I think it's super valuable. But I genuinely think anyone who's really, I guess, wanting to be competitive or really wants to at least learn more, because generally you have to constantly be improving yourself and working hard and learning new skills. And I feel like at times, maybe it depends on how busy your schedule are. Because like when I am pretty much preoccupied and have a lot going on, I won't have time to go through, like, you know, courses and study a lot, etc. But if you have extra time as an individual, I think it would be ideal to at least go through one of these websites and, yeah, you know, live up. So I wanted to show you an example of okay, so this okay, this is Bungie. I'm pretty sure. Okay, Bungie is like they do gaming. It's just a random example I wanted to show you. Let's say if you know still assessing your skills and you want to know where you stand. So okay, I'll just do like a, I guess, a quick run through that. So Bungie does mostly, you know, games, video games, but they also hire people who, you know, who also do the UI, because, you know, also when you're playing games, there's the UI side, you know, playing with settings and, you know, adjusting for accessibility for different kinds of players. All right. All right, so if we go down, okay, so let's see, golden. Okay, so okay, this is just a random example. Okay, so on Bungie, okay, in terms of at least like when they're listing down the responsibilities, you got your build and maintain large-scale UI and UX features, etc. I don't want to go through all of it. I'll just leave it there. But okay, one thing I kind of started doing, or at least I've noticed or learned from these other designers I've talked to, is that especially if you're like applying, because I know most of the time, the thing that gets you in the door in, you know, in the environment is you showing them a nice portfolio and you going through the interview process and acing the interview, then you get hired. But also when it comes to at least maybe by the time you get hired, and if you're willing to then, you know, if you're hoping to still be there, or at least maybe to grow, it would be ideal to at least, you know what they expect from you. So I also think that maybe whenever you're checking or like whatever job vacancies or whatever they want, it's good to check like responsibilities, what they want in terms of like roles for the designer, because it kind of gives you an idea. And also, if let's say you're still learning, you end up realizing, okay, so especially when they say the whole nice to have skills, like obviously since this company is more to do with the gaming, they would want someone who's also, you know, good at UI and UX to also be good at scripting, because probably they have proprietary software that they use for generating whatever UI for, you know, their players or the actual platform. And as you can see, it says experience working in agile and user-centered design processes, previous working experience, obviously if you have shipped a game before, motion graphics and visual effects. So this is more specific to, you know, the world of gaming, but I do think if people, especially depending on what interests you have, if let's say you're more interested in the automotive industry, or if you're interested in health, um, and if let's say a company wants someone who does that, it would be, even if you're not going to apply it, I think it would be ideal if you, trying to learn to just go through, okay, what do they want? Okay, this is a list of skills. Then you just do like a self audit. Okay, am I hitting any of these skills? Can I do any of these things to a certain level that's decent? Because I also feel like it also kind of guides you, because I've noticed there's that whole, you need to be the right fit, especially when it comes to your portfolio. And some people are just easier fits. Like if let's say like I have experience working in the world of finance, if I wanted to work somewhere else that does banking and finance, EDC, I think it would be much easier as compared to someone else. And I also think, when you look at these kinds of nice to haves or these responsibilities, and then you tailor your portfolio, I think it makes it easier, especially for people who want you to be part of like their organization or their team, for you to be the right fit. All right, cool. Okay, so moving on. What I also wanted to mention in terms of like, I guess, being more competitive or getting better, would be, I guess, I like learning or shadowing those who are already, I guess, working in the industry or doing well or part of big companies. And I have a tendency of watching like the Adobe Creative Cloud, do like UI and UX design, like live sessions, primarily because I think it's free education. Two, you get to learn a lot because most of the time when they're doing these sessions, you have someone who works at Spotify, someone works at Microsoft, someone works at Netflix, and they, the person will be there. Like I guess the person will be running the show, will be asking them like questions. You get to learn about more about them, but also you get to see their process, because I think the value in watching live sessions, or even like maybe doing stuff that we're doing right now, is that it's different from going on Dribble or Behance, and then you see the finished product and you go like, ah, that looks nice. But you maybe you'd only understand the design rationale if they made a case study, and then you figure out, okay, so that's why they did this, that's why they chose this. But when it's happening in real time, you get to understand, okay, all right, so that's why they do this. And I feel like, at least for me, there's value in like going through these kinds of programs. It doesn't have to be the Adobe Creative Cloud. It could be Figma based, it could be Azure, it could be any, like where they do like live UI and UX sessions, and where they have a prompt, let's design this. I think with those prompts, it will also help you when it comes to, I guess, whiteboard sessions or whiteboard challenges, when it comes to like, working on your own projects. Yeah. Then I just wanted to, I guess, mention one designer who I think kind of helped me, at least in terms of like improving my standards, or at least improving my, I guess, the way I do things. So yeah, so she's one of the, I guess you'd say, regulars on the Adobe Creative Cloud like live sessions. But right now she works at Apple, like Andrea Epi. So she made this book. It's more this book, I think, The How and Why of Design Systems, which I read. It's a pretty short book, but it's very comprehensive. And also when you look at her work, and I don't know, I feel like yeah, she's very good, but also I have learned a lot like from shadowing. So I don't know if any of us or any of the people, I guess, in the group have like a particular, I guess, UI UX designer who they really like, or who they like to model, or at least to learn from. I also think that genuinely when it comes to, I guess, growth and getting better, it does actually help in the long run in terms of growth of your skills. Um, yeah, I think, yeah. Then I think the last thing I'd wanna mention, at least in terms of the growing and being competitive, is I think it's also good to, I don't know, do research, which I guess agencies. I know IDEO is like, one of the organizations that comes to mind in terms of like, what are good design standards, what's the best way to do things. But there are also, there's I think Ramotion. I think they did a lot of the branding, design, and the UX for Mozilla Firefox. You can do further research on them, but I feel like when you study like such organizations, there's a lot to learn, from them, in terms of like how do you do things, how do you do things at their level, because like you go from maybe studying Andrea to studying like big agencies and seeing how you improve, where you go, etc. Yeah, so I think I should be, I think, done for now. Open to getting like questions. And also I need to take a break because I've been talking too much.
Well, that was quite interesting and insightful, especially for my side, and I guess for everyone else. For me, okay, I think we have to start with Kim's question to be answered first before we start popping up other questions. Yeah.
All right, cool. You can just ask it again so that, yeah, I remember it. I think you're
Unmute. Yeah. You kind of talked about a big part of, I guess, like leveling up is getting the self-awareness, and
yeah.
How much do you think of that for you has come from just like reading and learning stuff versus actually like talking to people versus like, as you're saying, shadowing people? What's
I
been the
think
most beneficial
I
for
think
you?
I think a combination of both like works, because okay, so for instance, on the interaction design like .org website, there's a lot of stuff that I would read about that would be like, okay, I had no idea. Like it kind of like puts you in you get, like, I wouldn't say imposter syndrome, but you get more like, it's kind of like you become more aware of what you don't know, even as you know more, like as you get more into your head, you realize like a lot, like what you don't know. But sometimes when it comes to learning, it depends on, because like you can just learn anything, but I prefer doing project-based learning, because I feel like sometimes you may learn something, then you forget it, because maybe that information at the time wasn't applicable. Whereas if, let's say, someone wants you to work on a e-commerce website, or work on something like that, or work on something that's similar to Netflix, and maybe there's a course about how to make, how to work on stuff like that, I feel like it's more beneficial, or at least you kind of end up having an idea of, okay, this is what I really need to know to tackle, or certain things you wouldn't have considered if you just were to go or tackle it head on without any prior knowledge. Then when it comes to shadowing, I guess, I mean it's I think shadowing, there's more like immediate feedback, because with reading or studying, it's kind of like you're aware of what you don't know, but when it comes to shadowing, it's more like the skill is, I don't know, I feel like the skill level is just obvious, because like you're actually seeing their designs, you're seeing that, oh, this person did this, they can animate this, and you get to see the design rationale. So I'll probably say, maybe being more involved, don't be isolated, talk to more designers who are better than you, or people who are still upcoming, and share ideas, even discuss, and like what do you think about this interaction pattern? Do you think it's a good idea? Does it work? Yeah, going through those like process. So I think even like what we have here, where if we could circle ideas, ask ourselves, okay, so do you think this interaction pattern works, or should we yeah, I think that kind of back and forth helps. But I think using both learning, reading, knowing that, okay, I didn't know this, helps. Although I'm more of like project-based learning, because sometimes you can just study for the sake of studying, but if you don't have I guess a chance to apply that information, you probably forget about it. And at least for me, that's how I prefer to learn. Like, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, or maybe I rambled.
No, it's interesting. I guess a follow-up question there, so I'm going to ask another question straight away. Is how do you get, because like part of this was getting better, actually getting feedback on stuff that you've already done. Like, how do you get feedback from people, or do you get feedback? How do you, yeah, have you got any suggestions for getting good feedback from people?
Right, so I guess in terms of feedback, it depends like what kind. Okay, do you want feedback on the design rationale? Do you want feedback on the, I guess, the visual design? Do you want feedback in comparison to, because like I think with the UI and UX stuff, there are a lot of dependencies. It's different from where, if let's say you're an artist, right? You draw something that looks nice, it looks nice, that's good enough. Whereas if you design something, you need to then eventually compare it to, did it actually, may have an impact. So some things I feel like they can be heuristic reviews where you just go, kind of like you're talking to someone and they just critiquing you do your design fundamentals. Are you spacing things properly? Like, are you the typeface that you're using, is it cluttered? Are you putting the right affordances? Are things easier to understand? The way you use progressive disclosure, like, are you doing, all these things? Are you using accelerators? Are accelerators necessary? Like, how is it improving the experience? Like, these are, things that you could do heuristic reviews where, like, basically analyzing like the design fundamentals. Are they knocking out of the park or not? But I think the more objective way of, I guess, critiquing, which maybe sometimes the results come out later because you only know once the project is out and whether it was successful or not. That's more of a the better way, but that's kind of like finding that out later. But I think initially when you're still learning or getting better, you know, certain things like we can easily like assess in the meantime, like design fundamentals, I guess doing some tests, talking to other people, or even showing people who are not in the UX space, just show, random, as long as you're not breaking any NDAs, because you have to be smart about that. Showing like your family member or some person doesn't even know what's going on, if they can go through an experience and it makes sense, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I answered in a vague way, but I hope I made
No,
sense.
it's an interesting thing to like ask for the right level of feedback, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Cool.
And sorry about that. So I've been learning about feedback a lot. In fact, I'm actually in a class for feedback. In my design team, we're doing this class for how to take feedback and how to give feedback, right? So, and also when I started, I'd been learning a lot about like how to actually acquire feedback, especially in the like work that I was doing. So we have what we call design team sessions, design feedback sessions that we do every like 3 times a week. And normally there you just come on with whatever work you have, and then you kind of give context and then tell what kind of feedback you're looking for, right? So I think those are important things to know, right? So you're either getting feedback on the work, like John was saying, or you're getting feed on the actual work you're doing, or feedback on personal performance, which is another type of feedback that we do at where I work now. So in terms of like design stuff, right, there's the most important thing, I think, based on what I've noticed, is how you give context, right? Because if you want feedback, the person giving it has to know exactly what you're talking about, or at least they have to be in a space where they completely understand your designs, right? Because as user experience designers or product designers, right, our goal is to live in the shoes of our users in their context, so that we can make the right decisions in the way that we design our product. So in a similar way, giving good context will help you get good feedback. So context, and then also telling your fellow designers or whoever you're asking for feedback from, I guess the type of feedback you're looking for. So if it's specific, hey, I'm looking for feedback on my color theory, I'm not sure about this, and that. So can you help me look at this feature? And I'm not sure if it aligns well with, I guess, standards, or I hope you get what I'm trying to say. Or if it's like, text or just the user experience itself, right? You have two options or two directions, right? A is going this way, B is going this way. Which direction is clearer? Could you give me feedback on that? And then you give them the context. I think that's very important when that's something that I didn't understand initially when I started working in corporate as a designer.
Yeah, I actually agree, because I feel like there are certain core things that, like, basically it's kind of like you're trying to assess, like various components that make up the whole. So, let's say 70% or 80% of whatever they're doing is working, but the other 20% isn't working, then you need to just zero in on that. Because, like, for instance, if let's say someone is struggling with color theory, you probably recommend I think it's the 60-30-10 rule of splitting. I think it's a it's a design rule that came from interior design, where you have your accent, you got your primary color, and you got your secondary color, and basically, the primary color takes up the whole, and then, it's stuff that simplifies the process, where it's like, oh, why don't you try this, or then you can make use of, various, but yeah, I think, yeah, feedback that's specified and with context actually helps. Like, for instance, for me, I think when I started to improve, because I think I had taken this I was into taking courses, like, what's it called, certifications, those Adobe certifications. I had gotten like the Adobe XD one, and like through getting the Adobe XD one, like, I think there was the whole design systems course. I think you can find it on YouTube. And I, like, through going through that, I realized, especially early days, that like the way our design was inconsistent, because like when you're working with multiple screens, and if you're not making components and you're not doing that, where your cards are like this, your main text is like this, you end up designing multiple screens, and for the colors are not consistent, the font sizes are different, like there's so much chaos. And when your developer goes through it and asks you, like, so okay, so the button has got 16 px, that other button's got 14 px, the other button's got 12 px, the other button's got 10 px, which one is it? So you're already creating problems, and you're kind of like, or you're kind of being a pain to your other teammates, because you're not organized, you're causing more problems. So I ended up realizing, you need to get your stuff together. And design systems are very important. Not just for the sake of things looking nice. If the button is just the size, it's just the size, and there's cleaner code, because they don't have to juggle a lot. Yeah. But yeah, generally, I think, yeah. Any more questions?
I also wanted to add on, when you guys were talking about getting feedback. There was a podcast that I was listening to, the design podcast, about getting mentorship on your career, to boost your career. And the guest there, I forgot his name, he was saying that you have to know the right people to ask for feedback or even ask for mentorship. It depending on their level where they're at the current moment. If you are a beginner and you're asking someone who has 20 years experience, the feedback that they will give you is that it's a more professional and more straightforward feedback. And this is a person that has forgotten how it is to start into the industry and how to start these practices and these tools and these courses. And that also comes back when you're asking for feedback. If I ask for feedback for a design that I did and I've just had 2 years of UI UX design, and if I ask someone who has 15 to 30 years of experience, it's a different feedback I'll receive from someone who I ask who has 5 years experience, because they understand the process that I'm going through than the ones that have more years, because it's more refined and it might confuse you as a person, because they have gone through all these processes, and it won't be as clear feedback as to the one you're looking for. And then also I wanted to ask you, John, when you spoke about the courses and leveling yourself up, how would someone without, let's say, the money to buy the courses be able to level themselves up? For example, I currently work at an NGO called Uncommon. We teach like these tech skills to like the high density areas, where these kids don't have access to the internet and to these resources. And we have taught a number of kids about UI design, but how would they later on level themselves up without the money to buy a course from interaction design or Treehouse? How would they level themselves up?
Right, that's a good question, because I think sometimes, especially when you're learning, or let's say if you're paying for your own education or an advancement, you're not also considering maybe the people who can't actually do the same. Because like, for instance, I think for me, especially because I also then got into 3D later, but I got into 3D because I could afford a good PC so that I could do 3D modeling. Because when you try to do stuff that's advanced, you need to have the right computational power to do it, or else, what's the point? But I do get what you mean. I think maybe, okay, so the solution would probably be this. Either you could introduce a cheaper alternative, or where maybe you could either, or you come up with something that's more affordable for people who live here. Because I know there are certain courses, like even like it's good on School of Motion, especially if you want to learn a bit more motion design or After Effects. Like some of the courses, like I think what the cheapest one is like around 300, or and for people who live in Zim, some people like their starting salary is like 200, 300 USD. Some make more depending, on the, what kind of career they're in. But 200, 300 USD is a lot, for some people, who live like locally. It's like, it actually, yeah, it's a huge sacrifice. So I would say, if we, as I guess, what you guys are doing, if you want to, I guess, help the young guys, or people who are less privileged to become the product designers of the future, I'll probably say either introduce either a cheaper alternative, or like if or maybe you could teach them for free if, let's say, money isn't like your end goal. Like if, let's say, if you want to do like some philanthropy work where like you want to educate them, because I feel like the more product designers we have, it'll be more useful, because it'll also improve the standards of like these what's it called, the stuff we have in Zim. If people are now more product focused, I don't know, it's very tricky. I think for the most part, especially I think in the art community, because I'm also into the whole art and concept design and stuff like that, a lot of guys, okay, this probably sounds like a bad recommendation, because it is kind of like, okay, so some people might go to torrenting sites or stuff like that, because like even if they were working because they live in Zim, they wouldn't be able to afford like the 200 or 300 or $500 courses. And funny enough, there's this person who works in, I think, movies, films, and VFX. This guy, I think from Kazakhstan, called Jama Jubarev. Like, sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but I also am into like people who do art and concept design, video games, and film. So he was talking to like people who live in less fortunate countries, because he actually came from a less fortunate country before he became successful and made it. And you'd get messages like, hey, I want to learn from you, but I can't afford your course. So the guy actually told him that I'm gonna, I think, torrent it or pirate it, which obviously it's not a good thing to do, because you need to pay for stuff. But he was like, I understand your situation, because you probably can't afford, as you are now, because you're still a student, and also you live in a country where the standards of living and the minimum wage is super low. So it'll be tricky. I don't know. I think it'll be an act of philanthropy, or on us, like on our part, because and also I think helping people, figure out what to do, because There's the issue of learning. There's also the issue of, let's say if they have like a low-end PC. I know that for the most part, if you want someone to do, UI and UX or just product design and they don't have a good machine, I'll probably recommend Figma, because Figma works from the browser. Then you're now making them know that, okay, just use this because it'll help you. I Adobe XD, I don't know, like after the newer versions, it's become so kind of heavy that if you got like a dual core, it won't even open. At least that's one thing I've noticed. So I don't know, it's very tricky, but I feel like if we really want to make it affordable, we need to just consider the Zimbabwean context. And if you don't want to charge, then probably you have to be philanthropy work, but now the question is, do you have the time? Do you want to put that time into teaching people, for free, if that's what you want?
Yeah, can I add to that? So first of all, I just want to say that I wish Zim had better internet access where it's much cheaper and even free. Honestly, that would really that would really help out the country, right? In many ways. But I just want to say how I became a product designer had nothing to do with the course, right? I did computer science, and then I was telling Kim the other day that I started reaching out to people on LinkedIn, because of course I fell in love with UX, found out about it after graduation. Then I started reaching out to people and kind of slowly trapped them into being my mentors, right? So it's like one question today, two questions tomorrow. Then eventually I'm just going back all the time. And next thing, they're kind of like a mentor to me. So that was one thing. Also, YouTube is a great resource. I feel like everything is on YouTube. Courses are good, but all of that information can be found on YouTube, right? That's another thing. And then also there are lots of free courses out there. So I've even, like, if you go on Udemy, right, you find a lot of free stuff. I think there's a subscription you have to pay on Udemy though. But there also are the platforms that are out there where you can get a lot of free stuff, a lot of free content. And then, to be honest, I feel like anything that you do, right, thinking about a PC, thinking about these courses, they're like $14 courses, $13 courses, it's $13.99 and so forth. Anything that you do, you need some kind of capital, right? It's just like with investing. There's always some kind of capital needed, because at the end of the day, you may say philanthropy work, but you're putting your future into someone else's hands, right? That's one thing. And then, so there's that. And then also, I feel like shoot, I lost my train of thought, but I just feel like there's so many opportunities out there. Another thing too is, let's say, like how I learned, like I was saying, reaching out to people and then constantly getting this help from them, right? So I got some advice from one of those guys. They told me there are lots of free workshops online where you can volunteer, like volunteering situations. For example, I worked on a project where it's in Baltimore, which is up north here. There was like, we're trying to build a web application for people that were like places that were being gentrified, to help those people that were losing their houses and so forth, right? So on that project, I met like 6 designers and like 2 engineers. And I got some real life experience, right? Collaborating with other designers and engineers, right? In an organized space where I was seeing how how everything actually works. I got to prove my skills and I got compliments. I mean, I got all this confidence from everyone seeing how I actually work, right? Which is very similar to a setting, at an actual job. So there's that voluntary opportunities. Even here in the States, they don't care if you're in Zimbabwe, right? Or if you're in wherever you are, they don't care. As long as, of course, now you have to sacrifice on sleep, because whenever they're doing their challenges, whatever it is now, but you're now choosing, hey, do I get better so that I can get hired in the future, so that I can add a project to my portfolio, or do I want to sleep, right? I mean, it's just a small sacrifice. And then another thing too, I think you mentioned this earlier, you talked about project-based learning. I highly recommend that. And I was going to tell you, Kim, that is the best way to learn, because I know you said you're shadowing someone. Shadowing is great to get rid of like what do you call it? Imposter syndrome, right? To see someone working and then you're thinking, wow, I can actually do that. So that kind of builds some confidence on, to you. And then projects, right? How I learned about the projects where I work currently was from me doing, how I learned about the actual products that we have was me doing projects, right? Small projects that forced me to dig into other parts of the product, right? So in doing that, I learned about the product, I learned new skills, I was forced to talk to engineers, things I had never done in my life before. So I know I mixed so many things in there, but I think the gist of my response was more of in line with how there's so many opportunities out there. All you have to do is just go out and reach out to people, lots of free stuff, try and get internet access, because that's, honestly, that's where it all is. So yeah. So if you want to be a philanthropist, buy people some internet access, I think that's a good way to help out Zim.
Yeah, that would be good. Just give them internet. Yeah.
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 But
I also feel like I also feel like, okay, during my presentation, I kind of overlooked something that I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. The part about networking and I guess, linking up with other designers. So I feel like, I think the best approach in terms of doing that is that don't just, because like, again, I feel like the two approaches. There's the West approach, which is what I think clout chasers do. And those people who just hang out with you because you're popular and they want to feed off your popularity. Like, I think a lot of people working in entertainment, influencers do that, where they go to someone who's cool, popular, then hopefully they redirect traffic to their channel, which I think when you're being disingenuous, a lot of people can tell and they're not excited. Then the other way is like, okay, so yeah, this person works here, they're good, I can learn from them, but also engage them as a human, find out their hobbies or interests, be able to have normal conversations outside of UX. Because, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're passionate about UX. Maybe some did because UX design, like at the high levels, it is like a six-figure, like career. You can make a lot of money. But if you can engage people at a personal level, talk to them, like not always about UX, but you obviously can get back to UX and it's like, oh, what did you think about this new feature? Do you think it's cool to see? If you can engage people at that level, they'll be more interested to help you out, because I feel like in a way it's kind of like doing the user experience design of engaging people or mentors so that they can help you. If you do that, I think I don't know. I feel like when you do that, it helps, because I've seen that. Like, I'll talk to guys who are like superstars, like design superstars, but you would have conversations normal, regular, etc. Then obviously eventually get it back to design. But if they know, I feel like they'll be more interested to talk to you, like as a human, and also to help you out. Because if you just keep it strictly business, I don't know. Maybe some people are not really a big fan of that. Where it's like strictly business. At least that's what I would notice.
Yeah, and I think something I've come to realize in the last few years is that we almost like sell ourselves short sometimes, or at least growing up in Zim, it was like you kind of looked to other countries like, oh, they're doing it great or whatever, and like, but then when I actually left Zim and started telling people, oh, I'm from Zimbabwe, people were like, oh, that's so awesome. And it's like your unique selling point. And so actually, if you're sitting in Zimbabwe wanting to learn UX and you reach out to someone in the States, like there's a good chance you have more of a chance of connecting with that person than someone in the States, just because like you're an interesting person to them. It's like, whoa, I'm talking to some kid in Zimbabwe who like wants to learn UX. So I think you actually in some ways have a better chance of getting your foot in the door. So yeah, don't sell yourself short because of where you're from, or even because if you have a bad internet connection, like don't worry about that. Like you can message them or something like that. So yeah.
Right. So I have a question, John. So you are a UX designer at Zimbabwe Shared Services, right?
Yeah.
So how has the experience been like being in the corporate world and are you part of a team? Are you the only designer? And is there room for growth within the corporate world in Zimbabwe, that is?
Okay. Well, okay. Okay. So before I answer, I'll probably want to stress that this is from the perspective of someone who's working in a more finance related section of like UX, where you're dealing with banks, etc. So probably my answer would differ from someone who's, doing something else as a UX designer in Zim. So I just want to make that clear because I wouldn't want my answer to be like the norm for everyone. Like, this is basically it. But I would say initially when I started, because like I was hired by this designer called Garth Jones. So he was mostly had a background in band identity design and etc. So it was more like he was kind of learning about UI and UX, and I was also kind of still new to it. So we're kind of both new, but he was like the senior guy ahead of me. So I guess early days, because like I noticed there was like a transition, a change, because early days there was a bit of detachment from banks. It was more like the whole pixel pushing thing where they're like, these are the services we offer. These are the services that you can provide for us. Because like generally when it comes to banking, you got your airtime, your transfers, like your zip it, your internal transfer, your external transfer, your bill payments. Then there's stuff that's more particular to like specific banks where if let's say they offer funeral policies or etc, or if they don't, or like, so basically some banks will have these features, some banks won't. So it's kind of like you're adding or removing. And initially they were like really detached. Well, I guess maybe the smaller banks were detached. The bigger banks were very involved and they wanted you to like not just make it look pretty, but also, work on the UX. So like Nedbank and also I think Nedbank and like recently there's this other bank. Okay, it'll come back into my mind, but they were now like more involved where they really care, like they want to go through the process. So you get opportunities to do some user experience. It was no longer just pixel pushing. So that was now interesting because there'll be stuff that you studied, that you did research or maybe through watching YouTube or taking courses, and then you get to apply it and like, okay, now I feel like a proper UX guy. I'm not just a pixel pusher. I know pixel pusher is a derogatory term that I'm using, but it's basically you're being told to make it look pretty, which if you're trying to do metrics of success, you need to know like what's moving the needle. Like does this direction actually affect more users, etc. But all I will tell you is that what's it called, the biggest, I think, bank or client right now is I think cabs. Like cabs is like the hugest user base, and it's like one of the biggest clients for like where I work. And we're currently working on like a cabs like design like for later. That probably will be launched later before the year ends. But yeah, there's room for growth. I think maybe the room for growth is on a client to client basis, because if the client is interested in, they're very hands-on, then they can be more done. If they're just wanted, because like there's also the dynamics of like money, because like sometimes we work on something, then you get told, no, don't work on it because the client hasn't finished the payment. So there's also the business side where before we continue, because they obviously they don't want us to just work on something and then nothing happens. I think one of the cases where we worked on something and I had completed the entire UI was, I think, on PSB, like completed, done, made sure it looked good, but then I think the client didn't, end up paying in the end. So that's more like a business issue, and that's not really related to my actual day job. But the times where you're working on something, then it's like, nah, you need to stop. So sometimes projects will stop because of business related issues where, oh, okay, this client, okay, but they paid, or maybe we don't have to work on this feature because obviously it's a business, they need to make money. So sometimes you want to do something, but then they say, no, just give them the minimum viable product. And if they pay more, you do more. Yeah, so yeah, that's I guess some of the stuff you do in corporate where you'll be working on something, or sometimes you won't be working on something because you'll be waiting for, you know, the client to give you feedback, like, let's do this, or let's do that. And if they don't, like, because I've had like where like there'll be like a week or two where there's nothing going on, and I use that time to actually learn or to gain new skills, which is I guess the nice part, because you sometimes have busy like months, and sometimes you're like, okay, you have downtime, and no one will stress you. Don't be like, oh, you got nothing to do. You're like, if you don't have something to do, make use of it. Courses, learn something, pick up new skills, study something. So that's kind of like my experience. Yeah. So by Jane, there are two designers. There's me, then there's the senior guy. And sometimes maybe the organization will have their own designer, and we'll go through what they have done. Like for instance, right now I'm working on cabs, and they sent so the visual design was like we're given the visual design for for cabs, but I noticed there were a couple of inconsistencies, so I'm now working on polishing up the design system so that by the time it gets to the developers, they're not looking at 10 or 15 different font sizes for the same button. Yeah. Did I answer you, or hello, Kim?
Yes, you did. You totally did. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering about design systems. How have you found, do you find that anyone else, like any of the other stakeholders, use them besides like the designers, like actually how like communicating them to other people in the organization?
So in terms of like design system, I think if you wanted to, I guess, communicate their value, because for the most part, designers and developers value design systems. Developers, because it makes things consistent and they don't have to generally if one color is doing this, because like sometimes, like, especially like at my workplace, right, since okay, so a lot of the times, right, most banks have similar features, and they have like source code, and they have like CSS classes, etc. So when they say for this client, the button color, so you got your primary button, your secondary button, your whatever, your header text, etc. So kind of those classes, they want to make sure it's consistent so that when they're developing, they take less time. So it's kind of like you're making your designs like neater and less, like, make it compact so it makes it easier for them to work. Then for you, obviously, consistency, making it look nice. So if you wanted to communicate value to other stakeholders, obviously business people or project managers are like, hey, if your stuff being more organized means, number one, it'll be faster for the developers. Also, like, if you do design systems in a way, you're also kind of documenting like how things are. It would mean that if you were to leave the organization and someone else were to come, they already have a Bible that says this is how our stuff looks until that Bible's updated when we do a redesign. So it kind of like makes it easier where things are like consistent. So there are a lot of design. I mean, a lot of the big companies have design systems. And even like Adobe XD is but Spectrum. Like if you search Adobe Spectrum, like you Google it, basically is a design system for the actual software, Adobe XD, and it breaks it down and you see the consistency. And I genuinely think it just helps because like, I don't know, like when you're, especially when you're now doing 200 screens or you're working on something that's enterprise level, if you don't have like like a Bible, you end up going with the wind, just randomly designing, and then you end up seeing consistencies, and you're like, oh, I have to fix all those. And then but if you already had something that was consistent from the get-go, it just makes life easier. So I think that's the whole point of design systems. Like they're very important. You'll be surprised how consistency is actually like a problem in some people, especially who are still starting, like making things look consistent. Yeah. And also not to mention, design systems are not just limited to just look and feel, also animations, because like you end up having interaction patterns. So if you want to do a certain action, it always swipes up. So as a user, you create associations that this action, you get a swipe up, this action. So like for instance, like I'm pretty sure if you want to check the time on your phone, you always swipe like, down on the screen. Or some users have the swiping from the bottom. But if you're used to swiping from the top, it'd be jarring when you're like, okay, let me check for the time that you swipe from the, like, no, that feels weird. So yeah, there's consistency in terms of how things are animated. This animation style means this, yeah. So it's not just limited to just the look and feel. Even animations have a, yeah, and copywriting as well. You still there?
Has to be repeated and everything capturing that. Yeah, I guess it's a kind of a good habit to learn. Capture and document stuff.
Yeah, and also I even like when you're done doing like working on a design, you should do like a design audit. It's like basically the way I see it is like when you're working on something, you got two, I guess you're in different states in terms of your psychology. There's the psychology, or there's the mindset of finishing, and then there's the mindset of critiquing. When you want to finish, you're more concerned about just getting it done. But when you have time to relax, then you go over it, then you start to see the mistakes you made, because it's kind of hard to try to fix something when you're more concerned about finishing it. And it's harder to finish something you're more concerned about fixing it. So usually if you have like the first draft, like a script or something, this is the first draft of your design. And maybe for the most part it's been approved. So then you start going through it. And yeah, and I think not just through your own designs, even like when, let's say you do the handoff and the developer starts working on it, because I've noticed, I think the thing that kind of breaks my heart a lot is like, let's say you work on a design, you make it clear that the input fields look like this and that. The developer works on it and like, it looks so different. It's like you didn't even look at the design. Like, wow. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they're more concerned about working. Yeah, than you making it look nice. So like they're more concerned about function. Yeah. So it's also good to do a back and forth like with the actual developers. I mean, sometimes I find
it's community.
Yeah, but yeah, it's good to make sure that whatever they're working on there. Yeah.
Okay. If there are any more questions, I think we can wrap up today's meeting. Thank you very much, John. I kind of learned a lot, and I'm going to also share what you presented. I was actually taking down some notes. So I'm going to share what you presented, and if I have questions, I know where to redirect people. But thank you very much. It was very insightful, and thank you everyone who's here for making time to join us today. It was tonight, actually. Thank you, everyone.
It's today for Tadira.
We're calling it a night.
Mm-hmm.